Hello dear and welcome to today's video. I hope you're doing well. Thank you to all my viewers and subscribers. You're great. I really appreciate you. And please, if this is your first time checking out my video, you're highly welcome. Please click the subscribe button as well as the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a new video. Also, give this video a thumbs up and share with your friends. So today's video is on how to cut and sew a crop top with shoulder darts and waist darts and no zipper. I have on this channel a previous video I made on how to cut and sew a crop top, but in that video I did not add dart to the crop top and I added zipper to the back. So today's video there will be no zipper and there will be darts added to the top. So let's get into the video. I will use this beautiful Ankara fabric, but I will be drafting out the pattern first on a brown paper to make it visible and easy to understand, since this fabric is flowery and has a lot of color. So I'll be drafting on my pattern paper. I have ruled out some lines. The first line is my shoulder line. From my shoulder line to 8 inches is my chest line, and from my shoulder line to 17 inches is the length of the top, and I have extra 1 inch for hemming allowance. Then on the shoulder line, I'll be taking the 3 inches, 8 inches standard for shoulder slope, and from the 8 inches point I came down by 1 inch for the front shoulder slope, and I'm connecting to the 3 inches point. Then also on my shoulder, I'll be taking half of my shoulder measurement plus extra 1 inch. Half of my shoulder measurement is 14 inches and half of that is 7 inches, and I'm taking extra 1 inch for that. And I'll also note that same measurement on my chest line, and I'll connect the 2 points together. From the shoulder slope line, I'll find the center of the line I just drew and come in by half an inch. Then I'll impute quarter of my chest bust measurement plus half inch ease to my chest line, and I'll connect the points I've just made from the shoulder slope to the half inch I came in by to the chest line, and that will be my front armhole. And I've added 1.25 inches sewing allowance. Then on my waistline, I will impute quarter of my waist measurement, which is 7.25, and extra 3 inches, 2 inches for ease and 1 inch for that. Then I'll also add 1.25 inches side seam allowance, just like I did on the chest line. So I would connect from the chest line, the measurement on the chest line, to the waist line. So for my neck line, I'll be taking a neck width of 3.5 inches. So I'm adding extra half inch to the 3 inch I have already, making it 3.5, and I'm taking a neck depth of 4 inches for the front neckline. So I'll connect to get my neckline for the front. So after drawing out my neckline, remember I said there will be a shoulder dart. So I would measure, after drawing out my neckline, I would measure what I have remaining after taking the neck width on the shoulder. I'll measure what I have and find the middle of that. I'm folding my tape and I'll find the middle and place a point like that. And then from my shoulder line, I would measure out my bust point. Because of the dart I'll be taking, I'll measure out my bust point. My bust point length is 9 inches, so I've noted that and I'm ruling a line across. And then on this line, I'll be imputing half of my bust span measurement. My bust span is 8 inches, so half of that is 4 inches, and I'm imputing that as well on the waistline, and I'm connecting the points I've made. And then I will take a dart on my waist. I'll take half inch on both sides of this line, and then from the bust point I will come down by 1 inch like we normally do on our basic bodies. So I will now connect this 1 inch I came down by to the darts on the waist, and I'll also extend that to my seam, my hemming allowance. Then the point I just made, the middle point I found on my shoulder, I will then connect that to where my dart stopped on the bust point line, as you see me do. I'll connect that middle to the dart on the bust point line. Then I'll now take a dart on this line on the shoulder, ½ inch on both sides. I'll take ½ inch dart on both sides, and then from the bust point I'll come up by ½ inch, and that will be where my dart for the shoulder will stop. The dart for the shoulder will stop ½ inch before the bust point line. So I'll connect. I took the shoulder dart ½ inch on both sides for the front, so I'll connect this point, this dart, I'll connect it to ½ inch before the bust point, and that would be that for the shoulder dart. So I'm basically through with drafting out the front part. So I'll just demarcate my seam allowance. I took a 1.25 inches seam allowance. On the bust chest line I have ½ inch ease, while on the waistline I have 2 inches ease. And also remember that on the shoulder I added extra 1 inch for the dart I will take on the shoulder. So when I sew that in, when I sew in the darts, my shoulder measurement will go back to my normal 7 inches shoulder measurement. I also added extra 1 inch for that on the waist. That means I added 3 inches allowance on the waist, 2 inches for ease and 1 inch for that. So I'll cut out my pattern. So like I said before, I have a previous video where I showed how to cut and sew a crop top, but in that video, in that tutorial, I did not add a dart to the crop top. And in that video as well, I added a zipper to the crop top I made in that video. So I will drop the link to that video in the description box of this video. So try to check that out and see the difference between that crop top and the one I'm making now. Now for the back parts, I have drawn out my basic and vertical lines like I did for the front. So I'll take the 3 inch, 8 inch standard for shoulder slope, and from the 8 inch point I'll come down by ½ inch. For the back I'm coming down by ½ inch for the shoulder slope, and I'm connecting right back to the 3 inches point. Then on the shoulder line as well, I'll take half of my shoulder measurement plus extra ½ inch. For the back I'm taking extra ½ inch for that. And then I'm putting the same measurement on my chest line, and then I'll connect the 2 points together. The point on the shoulder and the chest line, I'll connect that together. Then from the shoulder slope, I'll find the middle of what I have of this line I just drew, and I'll note the center. Just like I did for the front, I'll impute quarter of my bust measurement plus ½ inch ease, and then I'll draw out my back armhole. So I'm drawing out my back armhole, as you can see. I also added 1.25 side seam allowance like I did in front. On the waist, I'm imputing quarter of my waist measurement plus 3 inches allowance, 2 inches for ease and 1 inch for the dart I'll take on the waist. Then I'm also imputing half of my bust span measurement on the chest line and on the waistline, and I'll connect the points I've made. Then from my chest line I'll come down by 1 inch, and then on my waist I'll take ½ inch on both sides of the line I've just drawn for the bust span, and then I'll connect from the 1 inch I came down by from the chest line to the dart on the waistline, and that will be the dart for the waist. For the neckline, I will also use a neck width of 3.5 inches and a neck depth of 3 inches for the back. So I'll draw out my neckline for the back. And like I did for the front, I will check what I have remaining on my shoulder slope, what I have, and I'll find the middle of that and note that and draw a line from that middle to the dart on the chest line. I'll connect from the middle point I just noted to the dart on the chest line. Then on this new line I just ruled, I would take quarter inch dart on both sides of this line, and then the dart would stop. I would measure a length of 5 inches, and that would be the length for the dart from the shoulder, and I would connect this quarter inch that I took to the 5 inches point I made. So for the back that I'm taking 1/4 inch that 1/4 inch on both sides, making it half. That's why I added extra half on the shoulder measurement for the back, while in front I added extra 1 inch. So I also added my waist side seam allowance as well. I'm rechecking my measurements to make sure that everything is complete and correct, and then I would go ahead and cut out my pattern. Like I always do, I would recheck my measurements. It's always necessary to recheck before cutting out to avoid disaster. So I would recheck and then cut out my pattern. Then I'll use my pattern. I'll place my pattern on my fabric. I'll place them on fold, my fabric on fold, and then cut out my fabric. So as you can see, I've cut out the front part, and I added 1/2 inch and joining allowance on the shoulder. I also cut out my lining the same, but the lining is 1 inch shorter than the main fabric. Every other thing is the same with the main fabric, aside that it's shorter by 1 inch. I also cut out the back pattern as well, and I also used a pattern for a short sleeve, which I have, and I also have on my channel, to cut out my sleeve pattern, and the lining is also shorter. So what I'm doing now is just when I cut out my pattern, I notched where the darts are on the shoulder and on the waist as well. So what I'm doing now is transferring my darts. I'm just showing you just in case, so that to show everything how I transferred my darts to the fabric. So I measured the length of the dart on the pattern and also recreated that on my lining and on the main fabric. So all you have to do is measure the length of the waist dart, what you have, and just place that same length since everything is the same, and then measure out your dart, and also take from the notched part 1/2 inch on both sides, like I did on the pattern. So I'm just showing this to show you how I did it. Normally I would just draft this directly on the fabric, but I drafted on the pattern because I wanted everything to be visible. So what I'm doing now is just transferring my darts, my front dart, to my fabric and the lining as well. So I'll do that. I would draw out the dart on both sides and then sew in the dart. So I'll also do same for the back part. I'll also do the same thing. So for the darts I also notched where the dart is on the shoulder. So I measured the length of my waist dart, and then I would also be replacing that or recreating that on my fabric. So I would draw out the length and make sure also that my bust span is also 4 inches, and I'll connect it to the notch I have. And also for the shoulder dart at the back, remember that the length is 5 inches, so I'll also measure that and add extra 1/2 inch because of the joining allowance I took on the shoulder. So every other thing is the same. So I'm just recreating my darts. Then all I have to do after recreating my darts on the fabric and on the lining, next thing now will be to go to my machine and sew in my darts. I'll just sew in my darts. So I'll go to the machine and sew in my darts. I'll sew the darts on the lining separate and the darts on the main fabric separate. So after sewing that, I will show you what I have after sewing in my darts. So I've sewn in the darts, and as you can see, I've sewn in the dart. I did the same for my lining piece, and now the shoulder in front and the back would match. As you can see, it's matching. So I'll go to my sewing machine also and hold them together using the 1/2 inch I left for it. I'll also do the same for the lining piece. I'll hold them by the shoulder using 1/2 inch seam allowance. After that, I will now use the lining piece with the right sides facing each other to turn the neckline for the main fabric. I will also notch round the neckline and then top stitch towards the lining piece. So I've done all that, and I've also ironed the neckline so that everything would relax. So this is what I have. So the next thing now will be to use the lining to turn the edges, the hem part and the sides. So for each piece, the front piece, I would turn the lining in such a way that both the front side of the lining and the main fabric will face each other. I would arrange them and the seam parts would match. Then I'll use 1/2 inch to hem. I'll sew along and then sew the sides together. I'll do the same for the back piece. So I have done that and I've turned out the fabric to the right side and I've ironed properly, and this is what I have. The top is almost complete, so this is what I have. The next thing now will be to join the front and the back by the side using the side seam allowance I left. I used 1.25 inches seam allowance and I used quarter to hold in, turn the lining. So I'll use 1 inch now to hold the sides together. And after that, I've also lined my sleeve. So after joining them by the side, I'll attach my sleeve. So this is it, guys, on how to make a crop top without zipper. Thank you for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel if you have not subscribed. In my next video, I will show you how to make the pencil skirts, which I made for this crop top, how to make a pencil skirt, and that skirt will be having a vent. Please click on the notification bell so that you'll be notified. You'll be the first to be notified when I upload that video. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate you and hope to see you in my next video. Bye.